Number 1, Tennessee. At number 3, Georgia.
You betcha. I mean, right? You betcha. This is what we love college football for. Games like this. And this one has even ratcheted it up a little bit, in particular after the first college football playoff rankings in which Tennessee lands at number 1. I mean, we love big games. I was at a big game last weekend. Maybe not the buzz that this one is going to have, but the environments are so good. And I can't wait to see how this thing plays out. And by the way, there's a few very specific things that I want you to be watching out for in this game and thinking about in the lead up to the game. 3. 1 is location. 2 is Georgia's defense. And 3 is the quarterback battle. Let me go through all 3 of those. Let me start with location. So the fact that this game is in Georgia, in Athens, is a huge deal. Huge deal. I don't think that you all understand exactly how important home field advantage is in college football. And I think it gets skewed because, well, I think, one, because if you get down to the average teams or teams that are not in the top 15 in the country, like anybody beats anybody depending on location. So I don't think home field quite plays as much of a factor in those games. However, when you get up into the top 15 and you start seeing the best teams in the country, they're almost unbeatable at home. It is ridiculously difficult to beat a good team on their field. So that's why the location of this game matters. Tennessee traveling to Georgia. But it's not just my thought or sentiment on that. The data bears it out, in particular this year. If you're looking at the top, let's say, 15 teams or even the top 12 teams in the CFP, what you'll start to see is that all of those losses for those teams have come in tough road environments. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Oregon, that's a loss, basically on the road to Georgia. Alabama, their loss on the road to Tennessee. USC's loss on the road against Utah. UCLA's loss on the road against Oregon. Ole Miss's loss on the road against LSU. Utah's loss on the road against Florida. And then again on the road against UCLA. You're starting to see the pattern here, aren't you? In fact, when you look at the top 12, I believe the only loss in that bunch, the top 12 teams in the CFP, I think have about 7 total losses. And LSU is the only one that's really had bad losses, and neutral against Florida State and then at home, right? Like, aside from that, there haven't been a ton of those losses that you would say, man, like they should have won that one at home. The 3 best wins, I think, in college football so far are Tulane at Kansas State, Tennessee over LSU on the road, and then Ohio State at Penn State. Based on the rankings, that's what it tells you. So the location of this game matters a great deal. I look at this line, by the way, it's Georgia favored by 8, and you immediately say, like, wow, that's a big number facing what has become the best offense in college football. But then you start to look at the location and the trend in college football and how tough it is to beat a good team on their home field, and you realize, like, oh, okay, like maybe that number makes a little bit more sense. So that's location. This is a huge uphill battle for Tennessee because of where this game is being played. Now the next thing, Georgia's defense. And there's something much more, I should say, specific about my thought about Georgia's defense. All of us are excited to see Tennessee's offense go against Georgia's defense. But this defense is not anywhere near what they were a year ago in one very specific and one very important category, in particular as how it relates to this week. And that's their ability to get pressure on the quarterback. I firmly believe that if you're going to beat one of these teams that have a great quarterback and a great offense, you better present some pressure in the face of that quarterback. You better force him to get to his second and third read in the progression. You better force some stress on him from a vicinity standpoint where he has to manipulate the pocket and work himself to completions. Make life difficult on the quarterback, both mentally and physically. The problem is, Georgia doesn't do that. Not this year. not this year. Georgia only has 10 sacks on the entire season. 10. That's not enough. They've got to present a lot of pressure on Hendon Hooker, and it's going to be very difficult for them to do that. Not only do they have 10 sacks, which, by the way, puts them 120th in college football, they're also now going to be working without their best outside linebacker, Nolan Smith, who's out with that pec injury. So he's their leader in sacks, granted only 3, so not a huge, sack guy, but he is their best guy in terms of presenting pressure on the quarterback. Now he's going to be out. And what is Georgia going to do? How do you present pressure in the face of Hendon Hooker? That's going to be a giant question as I'm watching that game in particular. The reason why it's so tough to present pressure on Hendon Hooker is because of the scheme and the space that Tennessee uses. First of all, their offense is one of these offenses that uses the entire 53 and a half. I'm talking about side to side. They spread your defense out about as wide as you can possibly be spread out. Now, what does that do? Well, it allows you to run the ball pretty well, and Tennessee has done that. They're not dominant in the run game, but they run effectively because you're spread out, and now your support players in your defense have got to declare whether they're out in pass coverage or whether they're in run support. So that helps you run against more advantageous run numbers in terms of the defensive run box. So that's the space. But then it also makes you declare when you want to send an extra rusher. Okay, because you've got to do something and support your defense in order to send pressure. So what ends up happening against Tennessee is that when you want to present pressure, when you want to blitz, when you want to get somebody free in the face of the quarterback, he sees it coming from a mile away because of the space that they create in their offensive formations. It's really smart from Josh Heupel. Now, why doesn't everyone do this? Because you still have to win on the outside. What you're doing is you're creating islands for your wide receivers, but you better have wide receivers that can win on those islands, which they do. You better have a quarterback that has a strong arm that can throw it accurately and on time outside the numbers. That's a rare commodity in college football. So why doesn't everybody spread everybody out? Because they don't have Hendon Hooker and the wide receivers that Tennessee has. So it's a unique group of players and talent of players that utilize the space and the scheme in order to present a lot of stress on the defense. As Kirby Smart put it, this offense is really difficult to defend because of the speed, the space, there's that word I was talking about, the scheme, like I was talking about, the talent, which I was talking about, and the arm. So those are the things that he was talking about, and that's exactly what I just explained to you. Why is that difficult, all those things? Because how do you get pressure on the quarterback? You better have guys that can win individually on the edge, and now their best guy in terms of rushing the quarterback is out. So I fully expect Tennessee to throw the ball really well and very efficiently in this game, even on the road, even in the face of a great environment. And the reason I know that is because in the last 3 games that Georgia's defense, even their historically great defense last year, the last 3 games that they faced really elite quarterbacks and passing games, they gave up a ton of yardage. Hendon Hooker threw for 332 in that game against Georgia last year, even in a loss. Then when you looked at the SEC championship game, 421 yards is what Bama went for in the air. And even in the national championship game, 369. Now, Georgia was 2-1 in those 3 games, so they can overcome it, yes, but they were giving up yardage. I fully expect Tennessee to be able to throw the ball very well, and I fully expect Hendon Hooker to throw it for over 300 yards, which brings me to my last point and the third point. It's about the quarterback duel. Just like it was in Neyland Stadium with Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker, that's what's going to break out in Athens between Stetson Bennett and Hendon Hooker. So the question is for Georgia, can your environment and location and your quarterback, Stetson Bennett, carry you to a victory? Because everything else suggests that this number is too high at 8 and that Tennessee would go in there and actually win. I think that this is going to be an incredibly close game. I really do. I think that in the end, it's going to be a little too difficult for Tennessee to actually win on the road because, again, that's why I started with the road and the location first. You see all of these really good teams. They struggled on the road. Where's one of the only places Tennessee has struggled this year? At Pitt, on the road, in that overtime game. So I think eventually Georgia wins, but that's too many points. I think Tennessee covers the 8, but Georgia wins in a close and glorious game there in Athens.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.